honor, and for the final project of History and Systems of Psychology, I chose to research Emil Kraepelin. Emil William George Magnus Kraepelin, born 1856, died 1926, was a German psychiatrist who pioneered the field of clinical psychology and is regarded as the father of modern scientific psychiatry. His work and contribution to the field laid the groundwork for later psychologists to build upon to create our current understanding of mental disorders today. He is best known for his creation of the dichotomous classification of psychiatric disorders into manic depressive illness and dementia praecox, which later formed the basis for the bipolar disorder and schizophrenia diagnosis, respectively. This development led to the creation of the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, otherwise known as the DSM, and the International Classification of Diseases, the ICD. Kraepelin's meticulous hours of patient observation, emphasis on empirical research, and significance on the biological foundations of mental disorders greatly influenced the direction of psychological research and practices. His legacy as an important figure in psychology endures through his shaping of frameworks for diagnostic tools and treatment approaches that are still used to benefit psychiatric patients today. Emil Kraepelin was born in Neustrelitz, Germany in 1856. He was the youngest of two children born to Karl and Emily Kraepelin, who separated shortly after the birth of Emil. Karl was an opera singer and actor who struggled with alcoholism, and as a result, the children lived with Emily after the separation. His brother Karl became a well-known biologist throughout the country and especially recognized for his work with insects. Although Emil Kraepelin was first introduced to biology from his older brother, he became fascinated with medicine while in grade school when he shadowed physician Louis Kroger on his medical rounds in the country. Kraepelin attributed this experience for his treatment and pursuit of medicine in his autobiography memoirs. When he discussed his interest in medicine with Kroger, he was advised to become a psychiatrist, which would allow him to study psychology while still earning a physician's salary. Thus began Kraepelin's successful career as a psychologist. Kraepelin began studying medicine at the University of Leipzig and completed his study at the University of Würzburg. During his time at Leipzig, he practiced under William Wundt. Wundt later became a mentor to Kraepelin and fostered a lifelong interest in experimental psychology. He held many prestigious positions, such as senior physician in Prussia, director of Treatment and Nursing Institute in Dresden, the professor of psychiatry at University of Dorpat in Estonia, professor of clinical psychiatry at the University of Munich, director of the University Clinic, and head of the German Association for Psychiatry. Despite his many role changes and career successes, he still found time for his personal life. Emil Kraepelin married his wife Ina Schwabe in 1884 after being engaged for nearly 13 years. The couple had 8 kids together, 2 sons and 6 daughters. However, four of his children did not survive infancy. He remained close with his older brother Karl throughout his life, and in his final years he found religion in Buddhism. He planned to visit Buddhist shrines with one of his daughters, but unfortunately was not able to do so before his death. Kraepelin died in Munich, Germany at the age of 70 in October of 1926 from a bout of influenza and pneumonia. Emil Kraepelin's greatest contribution to the field of psychology was the restructuring of the psychiatric classification system. At the time, psychologists did not have a universal or concrete system in place for recognizing and diagnosing mental disorders that did not present an obvious physical cause. The most important concept of Kraepelin's work was the recognition and understanding that any symptom may appear in any disorder. In other words, there is no single symptom that dictates schizophrenia from manic depression, or there is not one single symptom that corresponds with schizophrenia, but not with manic depression. Rather, what dictates each disorder is a pattern of symptoms, rather than one specific symptom. He suggested that without a solid understanding of underlying pathology, the only way to correctly diagnose and treat illnesses was to distinguish them based on their specific patterns of symptoms. Thus, Kraepelin's classification system is one of pattern recognition rather than by grouping of symptoms. Kraepelin is also well known for his dichotomy. He broke down the classification of what was previously known to be a unitary concept of psychosis into 2 forms, which would be known as Kraepelinian dichotomy. The unitary concept of psychosis refers to the 19th century theory that there was no distinct conditions in psychology, rather one universal madness or psychosis. Kraepelin reformed this theory altogether and created two new classifications: manic depression and dementia praecox. He outlines dementia praecox using his long-term research and defined it as, quote, the subacute development of a peculiar, simple condition of mental weakness occurring at a youthful age. When he first described the condition, it was regarded as a degenerative disorder similar to catatonia or dementia paranoids. What he describes as dementia praecox is what we now refer to as schizophrenia, and what he refers to as manic depression now follows modern descriptions of bipolar disorder. He also noted that there may be specific patterns of the genetic and physiological causes of disorders. He noticed that typically there are individuals with schizophrenia among families with other schizophrenic peoples, while manic depression is more prevalent in the relatives of manic depressives. He was one of the first to suggest a genetic component to mental disorders. Along with this, he was a co-discoverer of the Alzheimer's disease in 1906. Alzheimer was working at the Munich Psychiatric Hospital with Emil Kraepelin in 1906 when he discovered plaques and neurofibrillary tangles while doing an autopsy of a 51-year-old woman, August D., exhibiting strange symptoms. These strange symptoms included suffering loss of memory, disorientation, and later severe dementia. He reported this finding to Kraepelin, who immediately took interest. Between 1906 and 1909, the pair found 3 other cases similar to that of their first patient. Kraepelin soon recognized the importance of Alzheimer's findings and began writing the 8th edition of his book, The Handbook of Psychiatry, in which he outlined the disease as its own clinical pathological disease. He suggested calling the new disease Alzheimer's disease. A key feature of the description included the young age of the patient along with other clinical observations that distinguish it from senile dementia. The definition of the condition caused the disease to be considered a psychiatric one for many years and predetermined, quote, senile dementia. On Kraepelin's authority, this new classification was used around the world, and in 1911, Kraepelin was introduced to a new patient illustrating similar symptoms to that of the previous patients, and for the first time, he was able to diagnose someone with Alzheimer's disease before their death. Kraepelin's notes of psychiatric conditions in general have shaped modern psychology. Before Kraepelin, it was believed that one symptom, such as hallucinations, could only belong to one disorder. However, due to his extensive hours observing and interacting with patients, he noted that any symptom can appear in any disorder. This finding persists today and can be seen in modern diagnostic tools. Instead of giving one symptom to each disorder, the DSM offers a pattern of symptoms to diagnose patients. His concept of endogenous psychosis is often regarded as his main accomplishment. He differentiated dementia praecox and manic depression as the two forms of psychosis. At the time of this differentiation, this completely changed the psychiatric field. This new classification formed the basis of the understanding of psychiatric disorders for the following decades. Despite this, in 1911, Eugen Bleuler, a Swiss psychiatrist, revised this idea. He renamed Kraepelin's dementia praecox to schizophrenia and regrouped its systems along with offering explanations as to why the condition emerged. It was also noted that schizophrenia was not a degenerative disorder as Kraepelin suggested and did not lead to mental decline. Regardless, the International Classification of Diseases and the American Psychological Association's DSM classifications are still rooted in Kraepelin's work. In fact, the DSM-4 definition of schizophrenia closely follows that of Kraepelin's description of the condition. His work detailing manic depression became crucial for the development of psychiatry. He outlined the symptoms that came with manic depression as either manic symptoms and depression symptoms. The set of symptoms and name for the disorder was published in the APA DSM-1 and DSM-2. In 1980, the disorder was changed to bipolar disorder in the DSM-3. Kraepelin was one of the first to document a possible psychological and genetic component to disorders. In his work, he noted that patients with schizophrenia typically came from a family of a schizophrenic. He recognized the same pattern in manic depression. This idea has now been applied across several other psychological disorders and is recognized today as a risk factor for certain conditions. Additionally, his contribution to the medical field with the finding of Alzheimer's disease was also very important. Without his work, it is possible that this disease would have gone undetected. Still today, not much is known about the disease, including how to treat or cure patients, but Kraepelin's recognition of the plaque and neurofibrillary tangles in the neurons still remains a central part of the disease. However, at the time of the discovery, it was considered a psychiatric condition and was labeled as, quote, predetermined senile dementia, end quote. Today, Alzheimer's disease is generally known as a biological/neurological disease and is a separate entity from dementia. Here are my references. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me.